Hello, lighting people. In 2001, Cree Incorporated appointed Chuck Swoboda to be its CEO. And over the next 16 years, under his leadership, the company started what it called the LED revolution. We saw components increase in performance to the point where we saw these performance increases and price decreases happen significantly over each 6 to 12 month period. That enabled the adoption of LEDs into light fixtures and lamps to occur very quickly and very rapidly. Even some of the largest lighting companies in the world didn't predict the adoption to happen as quickly as it did. Cree was one of the major players that enabled that adoption. And years later, what started once as a $6 million company that was a specialized materials company had grown into a $1.6 billion LED materials and light fixture company under his leadership. And today, we're pleased to have Chuck Swoboda join us, who, since retiring as chairman and CEO in 2017, has gone on to become the president of Cape Point Advisors. He hosts a very popular podcast and is also the author of a book called The Innovator's Spirit, a book that people of any business persuasion would appreciate and see as an enlightening and enriching and informative book. But people in the lighting industry will certainly be able to relate to it and appreciate many of the anecdotes as how the LED technology took over our industry over the many years described throughout the tenure he shared at Cree. So today, we're pleased to welcome Chuck Swoboda for 5 big questions. Chuck, hello, and thank you for being here today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to this.
Great, Chuck. Innovative is a term that lots of companies use to describe themselves and to describe their products. And you, as the innovator in residence at Marquette, you as the leader of Cree during the time that I just described, has overseen a lot of innovative projects and accomplishments over time. In fact, Fast Company magazine even called Cree one of the top 50 most innovative companies in the world. As someone who just wrote a book on the topic of innovation and your podcast, and has a popular podcast on the topic, what does innovation mean to you?
Well, you know, when you decide to write a book about innovation, the first thing I had to figure out is what does it mean? And so I actually went through a process and had to ask myself, and, you know, pretty interestingly, it's considered probably the most overused buzzword in the last decade. And so when I got down to it, what innovation means to me is it's something new that solves a customer problem and it creates real value. And that's a concept, honestly, that I borrowed from Thomas Edison. And I think what happens is for most of us, we'll talk about the new part, and that's what we focus on. And there are literally millions of inventions that never actually solve a problem or create value. And so that's the difference between something new and something that's truly innovative. And so much of what we were focused on at Cree was not just the new thing, but how do we somehow impact the customer's life, make it better, and move the market.
That's great. And you mentioned Edison as an inspiration for your innovation theory in science and invention, but also, of course, one of his major inventions is the light bulb that you and your company set out to disrupt. When you and Cree launched the lamp, the LED lamp, you were going up against the big 3, the GE, the Sylvania, the Philips. And now, as you're 3 years plus removed from the industry, we've seen those big 3, as well as Cree, exit the lamp business. Curious to know what your thoughts are on seeing all those events happen with respect to LED lamps and lamps in general.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand a little bit of the context. You know, our original goal was to actually sell LEDs to the lamp companies and the fixture companies. That's what we wanted to do. The problem was no one would buy them. I think the lamp guys saw the potential of LEDs, but the fact is they had very big factories that they had to keep full, right? They had a vested interest in having the old technology hang on a bit longer. So I think it's understandable that they didn't move as fast, but when we tried to sell LEDs directly to the fixture companies, nobody would buy them. I spent 2 years personally in these meetings, and what they kept saying is that, hey, we're not going to buy them until the customer asks for them. But that's not going to happen unless someone shows them what's possible. Markets don't disrupt themselves. So we were kind of stuck. And so I think the evolution of what happened in the industry was kind of inevitable. You know, the big 3 tried to play it slow. And by going slow, they created an opening for a lot of players, Cree being one to start the market, but then it was quickly followed by a lot of lower cost Asian suppliers that, because they waited, they not only created scale, but they got access to the market that if the big three would have embraced it, I'm not sure it ever would have happened. And then I think for Cree, we actually went into LED bulbs as an interim strategy. Did it primarily to build a brand and to move the market, knowing that long term, the LED bulb was an interim product, right? Our goal was to put LEDs in fixtures. If they don't burn out for 20 years, why do you need a bulb at all? So our thinking was get the bulb involved, drive the market, start seeing it grow. But we knew at some point that fixtures would have LEDs in them that weren't burning out and didn't need to be replaced at all. And second, we also knew that when LED bulbs start lasting 7 to 10 times longer, it was going to be a shrinking market. So I think it was inevitable that it was an interim business for Cree.
That's enlightening. That's really interesting too. You're able to drive demand by creating a category as well. When we look at the organic inventions that your company and innovations that your company made, there's a long list, but there was also growth at Cree through acquisition, particularly into the luminaire and light fixture space. In 2007, your company acquired LLF, which was not a huge company, but also a company, though at the time was credited as being the first to successfully commercialize that 6-inch integrated LED downlight. And that created a bit of interest, but certainly is something that you folks were able to use to validate the technology and move forward. But years later, when you made a large acquisition, $525 million purchase of Rude, who also at the same time owned the Beta LED brand, that was a large move that really created a lighting division, luminaires of all different types for all different types of applications, but also caused your manufacturer OEMs to now look at Cree as not just a component supplier, but also possibly as a competitor, and it created some channel conflict there. What would you say to companies today as far as how you were able to successfully manage that conflict, but just advice moving forward, how to manage channel conflict in general?
I think it depends on what your goal is. At the time, our choice at Cree was this. We could be a market leader in a very small market for LEDs and lighting, and we'd have almost no conflict. Or we could try to create a really big market for LED lighting and know that it was going to cause some trouble. And what we chose is that at the end of the day, the big market was going to be best for Cree as business overall, because we could supply to them, whether it be as luminaires or primarily as an LED company. Now, the fact is that it did hurt our LED business. There were certain large lighting companies that after we bought Rude Lighting, essentially created what we called the ABC purchasing policies. It was called, they would buy from anyone but Cree. And so look, that limited us. That being said, the LED business still continued to grow. And it was still extremely successful. And it wasn't the lack of market conflict that hurt the business. Ultimately, it was a massive influx of low cost, lower performance LEDs that were available from Asia. And they became good enough to start servicing some applications and really hurt that business from purely a cost price standpoint. And so I think in the end, what we did worked. I think if you're going to lead the market, you've got to be willing to ruffle some feathers. If I was to do it all over again, I think what we could have done better was communicate with the channel and the various partners that are out there. I think, we probably had so much fun doing things that no one expected, that our desire to surprise people and shock them also made them nervous, and I think made them doubt what our true intentions were. And so I think, if I was going to give anyone advice, is if you want to be disruptive, it's great to be first and do what no one else is expecting. But I think you got to put a little more time and energy into being really effective at communicating with your partners so they understand who you are and what your intent is.
Thanks for that. And Chuck, when you look at the way the company evolved over the years, where you became a large semiconductor company and a large lighting fixture and lamp company, towards the end of your tenure, there was a potential acquisition selling off your Wolfspeed components business to Infineon in Europe. Regulators didn't approve that, but if they had, how would that have changed the trajectory of Cree and affected the dynamics in the lighting industry, in your opinion?
Yeah, that was the best deal that I never did. And so I hate to say I have to thank the government for that. But if you look at the trajectory of Cree today, that business has become incredibly important. So I think, with technology, it's hard to see in the future. And even Cree at that time, I had trouble seeing what the potential value of that is. But if it would have happened, what we would have become is an LED and a lighting company. I think what people forget is the LED business was bigger than the lighting business and definitely more profitable. And I think what would have been different in Cree's approach is if Wolfsby would have been sold, we would have invested even more heavily in R&D, both on the LED side and on the lighting side. Because our goal is that to succeed in those markets, you had to keep pushing the limits of what the technology could do. I think with LEDs, that would be all the things people would expect, performance and capabilities to make it easier to make better lighting systems. And not just for homes or businesses, but I think you would have seen Cree push much harder into some other more specialty lighting applications where LEDs, I still think, have a big play. On the fixture side of the business, I think what we would have done is that we would have probably shifted our focus from being pretty heavily on what I'll call the retrofit generic white goods business, because that was the market that was available to us. And where we were heading, but when I left Cree is we were really looking at how do we invest R&D to push the market forward, and less about just pure fixture designs. But I really believe that there was an opportunity to push this lighting system as a core part of the smart building, but with a little bit different twist than I think what we've seen in other places. Our approach wanted to be very open systems. The goal was not to sell a proprietary system. It was to make, essentially, you wanted a smart building and we gave you the lights for free. That's where we were heading with that. And I think that there were some incredible capabilities. Now, I know there's some cool products out there today, but I don't feel like anyone's captured that quite yet, of really getting, people to embrace what's possible when you have all these sensor nodes that are already in your building that could do so much for free for the rest of the building.
So playing off that, what do you see as you look at the industry today, in your opinion? What do you see as potentially being able to disrupt the industry moving forward?
I've actually started to shift. I think that, Cree was so focused on product, but the other thing we tried very hard and were unsuccessful at is thinking about disruptive models to the industry itself, right? How do you better service the customer? And so I think what we're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years, and I don't know if I got the timing exactly right, but, as I study innovation, not just in lighting, but across many industries today, essentially what happens is technology enables you to get rid of inefficiencies. And if I look at the historical structure of the lighting industry, it's there for very logical reasons. There's expertise provided along the way. But I think that with the advent of technology, the ability to provide information seamlessly across platforms, the ability to, frankly, do the building design with a computer and not a person, that I think we're going to see essentially a consolidation of the different pieces to where the customer sees just one. I imagine a day where, someone wants a building and the contractor puts it into the system and it auto designs most of it. Not some especially. I still think there'll be some very specialized places, but for the majority of an office building or a factory or even a school, or you're going to see some fairly sophisticated algorithms that can tell you where to put the lights. They're going to use standardized lights. They're going to already know what the price is. And you're going to be able to design the building to the budget with a push of a button and then deliver it already. And I think we've started to see some of these things. The example I like to give people is that, I look at RAB lighting and I go, there's a company that they're bringing in good, but not great fixtures. They're not super high end. They definitely are cost competitive. Their pricing is completely transparent and it's always in stock. Like, what other industry doesn't do that? Like, I just think we're going to see something where these pieces start to come in. So I think it's going to be on the business model. I don't think it happens in one step. And I don't think it's a threat. I think it is an opportunity. I think it's a chance for people to look at their expertise and figure out how to reapply it. So for example, if I'm a lighting designer, if it becomes digital, I can service many more customers with my expertise than I can doing it the way I do today. And if I have the most efficient distribution capability or transparent pricing, boy, I have access to lots more customers. And so I think we're going to see part of the market find these efficiencies. And I think the people with the best skills actually win big. And I think some of the people that maybe add marginal value are going to feel pressure. And it's not to be negative. I just think that's how these markets tend to evolve. And so that's what I would expect to happen in lighting over time.
Well, those are some interesting insights and exciting ones as well. And I appreciate all the examples and insights that you shared. Learn a lot from you as always, listening to your podcast, reading The Innovator's Spirit. It's always great to hear your insights and thoughts. And we look forward to many more as you continue to evolve as a thought leader on this topic. So Chuck, we really appreciate you taking some time to be with us today for 5 big questions.
Well, it has been my pleasure. And I hope that anyone who was involved in the industry and some of those stories in the book, if you think I got it wrong, you should reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. I've gotten more great conversations about how to see these things from different perspectives. And frankly, I've learned a lot since then. So thanks for having me on. And I wish the best of luck to everyone and what the exciting future is going to happen in lighting.